Welcome to Naresh Technologies. I'm Bangar Raju. This is the continuation series of our ASP.NET videos. In the last video, I was just demonstrating about controls and how to work with controls and about the properties, methods and events of controls. So what I explained, every control is going to have three things associated with it. Those are properties, methods, and the third one is events. So what are properties, what are methods and what are events? Properties means, properties are nothing but attributes of a control and they will be having their impact on the look of the control. Properties are nothing but attributes of a control which will be having their impact on the look of the control. Okay. Next thing is methods. Methods are actions performed by the control, and the third one is events. Events is, an event is a time period which basically tells when an action has to be performed, when exactly an action has to be performed. So all the three things I was demonstrating in the previous video. Today in this video I will just explain about PostBack. I will just clarify about a PostBack. What is this PostBack? What the PostBack means? See, let's take a web form. And on the web form, let us add a button. Okay, a text box and a button. Text box. And next I'll place a button. Now, when I run this, basically, we are running the application in the browser, but actually, in the browser, the URL is entered, and when the URL is entered and hit, the browser is sending a request to the web server for a page. Which page? The name is web form 4. The name of the web form 4, the request is going. When the request goes to the server, remember, this is the first request we are making to the page. This is the first request we are making to the page. This is the first request that goes to the page or the web form. And now, when I click on this button, again the request goes to the same page. Again the request goes to the same page. When I click on the button, the request again goes back to the same page. You watch it here, your request went to web form 1, first request, and the server has taken the request and sent you the web form. And the web form or the web page is coming and sitting on the browser. Now when I click on this particular button again, you see here, you just have a look on this particular location here. When I click on this, you notice it is blinking up. And what is happening? A new request is going back to the server. So how many times I click on this button, that many number of times the request goes back to the server, and this is called as a postback. We call this as a postback. So what is a postback? A postback is a process of a page submitting back to itself, or a page contacting back it to itself. It is contacting or submitting back to itself. You may ask me a question, what is submitting? What is submitting in the sense? Basically, I did not enter any value in the text box. But suppose if I am going to enter some value in the text box and click on the button, this value whatever I entered in the control is also carried back to the page now. This value is carried back to the page, and that is called as a submitting the data. And basically we call it postback submission. Postback submission. First understand postback. Postback means a page calling itself again. Postback is nothing but a page calling itself again. It is calling itself again. And in this process, it will submit the data. What data? All the data we entered in the controls. We have only one control right now here to enter the data, but tomorrow you can have 10, 20 controls. All the controls will have some values. When I click on this particular button, immediately all the data associated with the controls is submitted to the server. And we call that as a postback submission. So first, postback. What is it? A page or a web page contacting, sending a request back to itself is called as postback. A web page sending a request back to itself is called as a postback. Okay. So how do we identify this postback in our code? See, one thing remember, right now we are working with a web form. What is the name of the web form? Web form 4. The name of the web form is web form 4. And behind the screen, every web form is a class. Why? Basically, in object-oriented programming, everything is a class. When you learn C#, remember, every day you are defining classes. Here also we are defining classes only. So this is a class. Internally there is a class. What is the class name? Web form 4 is the class name. Right click, go to view code, and if you go to view code, you will be finding web form 4, a class called web form 4. It is a partial class. It is a partial class. What is partial? If at all you want to understand about a partial classes, watch my C# videos about partial classes. There you have an explanation about the partial classes. Just watch the video. Okay. So the partial class, it is a partial class, and this class is inheriting from a predefined class called as page. And this class is defined under namespace called system.web.ui. So every web form is a page. Every web form is a page. So this is a page now. Why? A class inherited from a page is automatically a page. So this web form is a page. That's why I'm telling you, sometimes I'm using the word as a web form, sometimes I'm telling web page. Both are similar. Every web form is a web page. Okay. So now this web form is inheriting from page. So this is also a page. Now in this class page, there is a property called as is postback. What is it? There is a property called as is postback. Okay. So parent class members are automatically going to become the child class members. So I can say this dot is postback. It's a property. It's a Boolean read-only property. It is a Boolean read-only property. And this property will always tell you whether it is a first request or a postback request. First request or a postback request. If it returns is postback, is going to return you false. If the is postback is going to return you false, what is the meaning? It is the first request. If it returns true, it is a postback request. So first request will always be 1, but postback request can be any number. Just to understand here, I am writing response dot write this dot is postback. I am just going to print the value. And now when I run this, I am making the first request to the web page. Because I am going to make the first request to the web page, is it a postback? No, it is not a postback. So the value will be returning as false. Watch. And you watch the output is false. But when I click on this button, what happens? The request goes back to the server. Okay, same page. Once I click on the button, it is going to contact back itself. That's what I just said you here. The requesting back to itself. A request is sent back to itself. So because the request is sent back to itself, when I click on this button, a re-request goes to the page, and now the is postback will become true. You can see that. Now onwards, how many times you click on this is postback will return you as true only. So this is what we call as a postback. So tomorrow someone asks you what is a postback? What is a postback? A web page sending a request back to itself is called as postback. And to identify a postback, our class, why our class? Because it is present to the page class, and the page class is our parent class. So our class is already automatically going to inherit all the members of the page class. So our class contains a property called as is postback, which can be accessed as this dot is postback. This dot is postback and is a Boolean read-only property, and this Boolean read-only property will return you true or false to identify whether there is a first request or next request. And it will be false if it is first request and true if it is next request. What is it? False if it is first request and true if it is next request. Next request in the sense or postback request. Array next request or postback request, both are same only. I can call next request or I can call postback request. Both are going to be one and the same in this context. So this is what postback. Okay. And what is postback submission? Postback submission. What is postback submission? Watch. Whenever, okay, again I am making the first request, value false. Now I am entering some value here, some value hello world. And if I click on this button, okay, I got true here, that is a different story. Now when I click on this button, the value of this control is submitted to the page. It is submitted to the page. Which page? You are contacting the same page back. Because you are contacting the same page back, all the data is resubmitted back to the same page. It is going to submit all this information to the page. And that's way you can access this value on the page in server. You can access this value on the page in the server. How do I access? Go to design view, double click on this button, generated me a event handler, okay, and here I can access that value response.write. Response.write what? Text box 1 is the name of the control, dot text. I can access the value here. Array, not in the click, you can access it here also. In the page load only you can access this particular value. Okay. So here just understand, I'm giving a break, and here I am writing here value of text box. So it is going to print me the value of the text box. So I am making my first request. When I make my first request, text box doesn't have any value. Okay. Small mistake here. Break. You see there. This is the first request, so false. Value of the text box, no value. Why? Because the text box doesn't have any value. Now here I am entering a value called hello world. When I enter the value called hello world and click on the button, the page is immediately submitted to the server, and once they are submitted to the server, the control value is accessible to you on the server. See there, value of the text box is hello world. You can see the value, I am just able to print it here, and is a postback. And when do I get the value? I get the value only if it is a postback. Okay. See, that's why first time when I run this, it was showing me a message. What is it? Value of the text box, but not printing any value. Why is it not printing? Because the first request. So I want this to be displayed only from the second request, but not for the first request. Means I want this to be displayed only in the postback request, not in the first request. If that is the case, what you can do, when you are writing the logic, you can just use this condition. What? If this dot is postback, is equals to true. This dot is postback is equals to true. Means if it is a postback request, then only this logic has to be executed. Run again. You see now, I did not get that message. What message? Text box value message is not coming. But now I am going to enter some value and click on the button. Now I get the message. Why? Because I have written a condition there. What is it? Execute this logic only if it is a postback. If it is not a postback, don't execute this logic. Okay. So like this, we can just check it out and write the things over here. Okay. So this is what we call as a postback. Am I clear with postback and postback submission? Postback means a page sending a request back to itself is called as a postback. What is postback submission? In a postback, all the data that is associated with the form and its controls will be submitted to the server, will be submitted to the page on the server. That is called as a postback submission. We are submitting the data back to the server. Okay, that is called as a postback submission. Where we are submitting? We are submitting it back to the same page. We are not submitting to some other page here. We are submitting to the same page here. That's called as a postback submission. Now listen, who is capable of submitting a page? Who is capable of submitting a page. See, the question is, who is capable of submitting a page? What is it, who is capable of submitting a page? In the sense, right now when I run this, the page is getting submitted to the server. Who is doing that? Who is doing that submission job here? See, by default, button control is designed to submit the page to the server. In HTML, we call this as a submit. In the previous video, I have just demonstrated. Watch the first video of the controls. In that, I said you, this button, in HTML, we call it as a submit. The name itself is indicating, and also that not only this one, you right click and go to view source, and here you see, it very clearly it shows you, input type is submit. And the submit is just like a button, and this button is the control which is by default designed for submitting the data to the server. So if the question arises, who is capable of submitting a page to the server, okay, listen. By default, button control is designed for submitting a page to server, whereas other controls like text box, checkbox, radio button, drop down list, etc. are also capable of submitting page to the server, provided there is their auto post back property value is set as true. Default is false. Understand? By default, button control is designed for submitting a page to server, whereas other controls like text box, checkbox, radio button, drop down list, etc. are also capable of submitting page to the server, provided their auto post back property value is set as true. There is a property for all these controls called as auto post back, and this auto post back value is by default false. And if I make this auto post back as true, these controls are also capable of submitting the page to the server. You can see, you will not find that property to the button. Why will not find? Because button itself is designed for submitting the data to server. That's why if you go to the property window, if we go to the property window, in the property window, we will not find any property called as auto post back, because I am just arranging them in the alphabetical order. The auto post back property should be visible on the top. It is not there. Why? Button control is designed for submitting the data. So we will not find this particular property to this control. But come to text box. Text box also has this property. But the default value is false. You watch out. Auto post back value is false. If the auto post back value is true, text box control also can submit the page to the server, can also submit the data back to the server. It is also capable of submitting the data to the server. So I am making this as true. Now run. When I run this, the first request, so auto post back value will be, okay, now I am going to enter value A. When I am entering a value A, and when I just try to come out of the text box, immediately the page is submitted to the server. Actually what I done is I entered A and I used my tab key to come out of the text box, and the page is submitted. See, I am entering B and let me come out of the text box. How? Tab key, page is submitted. You can just concentrate in this area to just understand the submission. In this particular, this refresh button and all, if you just notice, you will notice it. C, again a tab key, page is submitted. D, page is submitted. You can just notice it. It is submitting the page back to the server. So who is submitting? Text box is also submitting. By default, who is capable of submitting the data? Only button is capable of submitting the data. Okay, by default, but other controls like text box, checkbox, these are also capable of submitting the data. provided their auto post back property value is set as true. Default is not true, default is false. Because the default value is false, once you make it true, that will submit the page to the server. Okay. So again, have a look on this. Let us stop the application, run again, and I'm making the first request. So this is false. Okay. Now I'm writing A. Okay. Tab key, page submitted to server. I did not click on the button at all. I did not click on the button at all. Just only I was submitting in the text box. Okay. So you'll have a doubt here. What is the doubt? When will it submit? Button means we click, but text box means when it submit. The text box submits to the server whenever the text is changed. Whenever the text is changed, it is going to submit the data back to the server. Okay. So this is all about your post back and the post back submission. Post back and post back submission. When the post back happens, automatically the data is submitted back to the server, and that is what we call as a post back submission. So there is a post back here, and we also have a post back submission. And default post back can be done only by button, but other controls also are capable by setting a property called auto post back. So in this, 4 things we are trying to understand. 1. Post back. 2. Post back submission. 3. Is post back property. 4. Auto post back property. Is post back is to identify whether that is a first request or a post back request, and auto post back is a property available for a control. When set as true, will be ready to submit the page to the server, or when set as true, gets the capacity of submitting the page to the server. And button doesn't have this, and button is designed for submitting the page to server. Okay. Thank you for watching the videos. For more videos, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, Naresh IT.